Finally, I'd like to introduce Andrew Weaver. Andrew is a professor and a Canadian research chair in climate modelling and analysis at the University of Victoria. He was a lead author in the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 2nd, 3rd and 4th scientific assessments, and is currently the chief editor of the Journal of Climate. Andrew.
It's a pleasure to be invited to Langley and Vancouver to be part of this panel. As you know, I'm from Victoria, where we have our own liquid waste management issues that we're currently dealing with. I enjoyed the panel discussion last night. It was really quite an engaging discussion. And I'm not here to advocate for any particular widget or any particular solution, but I think to try to set the stage for the type of conditions in which we live. The first thing I always ask people when they're thinking about these kind of processes is, who are the decisions today going to affect? Most of those people who the decision over what to do with Vancouver waste, who will be affected by that decision, aren't actually in this room. Many of them actually aren't born yet. So this is one thing I would ask that people think as they move towards making a decision as to what to do with Vancouver waste, is the results of the decisions are not going to be borne by those making them, but they'll be born and will have the people, the children of today and their subsequent children and generations ahead will have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Which brings me to the bigger question of global climate change, of which landfill, waste disposal, waste energy are all part of a bigger question. We know globally, emissions from landfills contribute about 3%. That's a small amount. In BC, it's 5%, but these are low-hanging fruit. These are emissions that are easy to capture. In order to deal with this problem of global warming, which is yet another problem that our future generations will have to inherit, we have to take society as a whole, down to zero emissions over the course of this century. That's 100% emissions reduction. It is the only means by which we can stabilize the global climate, atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases. Now, I can put that into context, the scale of this problem. Let's suppose we want a 1 in 10 chance of having 2-degree warming, not surpassing 2 degrees pre-industrial warming. That's a number that's being agreed to by most of the nations internationally as a kind of target. We don't want 2-degree warming above pre-industrial times. Well, we can quantify that. We now know that that says that we can emit, as a global society, about 68 gigatons of carbon from anthropogenic or human-produced sources. That's about 7 years at current rates. And then we pass a 1 in 10 chance of breaking 2 degrees. Let's suppose we want a 1 in 3 chance of breaking 2 degrees, and there's all sorts of reasons why we would pick 2 degrees again. Then we have 482 gigatons of carbon that we can release from now in perpetuity and not break 2 degrees with a 1 in 3 chance. Now, I wouldn't get an airplane with a 1 in 3 chance of it crashing, but nevertheless, these are the kind of odds we're talking. We're currently emitting about 10 gigatons of carbon a year. This is a big problem requiring big solutions and the decisions being made for these solutions are being made by people living today, and the effects of these decisions are for those people down the road who will have to live with the consequences. That's true of global climate change, it's true of our energy systems, it's true of the way we live, and it's true of the way we deal with our waste. Who can argue? I don't think anyone in this room would argue against the concept and the goal of zero waste, massive recycling. None of us on the panel will argue against it. I think everyone would like to see that as a goal. The reality is we are where we are today, and we have a goal in the future of zero waste. The question for Vancouver is, what do we do between today and that future in order to get us there? I would argue that more of the same is not working, more of the same cannot work, and taking your problem and driving it somewhere else and making it someone else's problem is not going to work and isn't working anyways. I would like to see the provincial government introduce legislation that requires municipalities to deal 100% with their waste inside their own municipality. This would then make people recognize and realize that waste is part of their living. You can't put it in a truck and take it out to Cache Creek and say it's your problem, no longer our problem. It's part of being around as a human. You consume, you deal with your waste. People will then think differently about waste in Vancouver if they recognize it has to be dealt with locally. I really would like to see such legislation from the provincial government. Which then leads to my final point. We are where we are today. We have to get to a goal of zero waste down in the future. How do we get there? Minimizing emissions. Well, one of the ways we can think of this is rather than viewing waste as garbage, but potentially in the interim as a resource. It is not true to say that we produce all our electricity in BC and therefore we don't need any other electricity. In fact, in Alberta, most of their electricity comes from coal. If BC can produce excess electricity, and WTE is an example under the accounting frameworks that allows one to get credit for emissions reductions. If Vancouver and BC can produce electricity from other sources, it can displace coal-burning energy from places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, which are currently being done as the cheapest form. So we don't live in Vancouver, well, I don't, I live in Victoria, but what we live in is in a shared environment. And I think people need to start thinking, whether it be in Victoria with our sewage issue or Vancouver with their waste disposal, of the bigger picture, that they're part of a bigger picture. They have to deal with their problem locally and deal with one that's best for everyone, including those down the future who'll have to live with the consequences. Before I finish, I'll just say that one of the things, if Vancouver decides to move to through consultation a waste energy facility, it doesn't have to be all about burning plastics in the path towards zero emissions or zero waste. One might view it, if it's done right, in a biomass-ready capacity as a place where maybe down the road agriculture and other waste could be diverted to continue producing electricity from bio-organic sources, which are net zero emissions, if they are taken from an annually produced crop formation, something that grows in the summer, normally dies and decays in the winter, cut it down and burn it, that's carbon neutral. I'll leave it there. Thank you.